Very excited about our next guest coming from Michigan today. We have Matt Thibaudeau with us. Matt is the Director of Business Efficiency at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. For the past 11 years, he has led significant enterprise-wide redesign efforts across Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan companies that have delivered nearly 1,000 individual initiatives and more than $1 billion in business value. Matt has a finance background and has been instrumental in developing Blue Cross Blue Shield's practices for managing and maintaining the value outcomes of the initiatives within the Blue Cross Blue Shield portfolio. So we're going to talk about healthcare. We're going to talk about value in healthcare through process improvement and innovation. Matt, it's a real honor to have you with us. On behalf of our global audience, we're very excited to hear about your journey and transformation in healthcare.
Thank you very much, Jose. I'm sharing my screen. Let me know if it's all set.
Looks great.
All right, excellent. Well, good morning, everybody. As Jose mentioned, I'm talking to you today from Novi, Michigan. That's a western suburb, kind of halfway between Detroit and Ann Arbor. Jose mentioned that I started in finance, and let me give you a little additional info. I actually started as an auditor, a CPA, in one of the big six. Well, that's how it was known in the 80s when I was there. I think they call it the big four now. And then I moved from there, and I spent 17 years at one of the big three automotive manufacturers. And about halfway through that trip, I got diverted from finance and accounting and was asked to begin leading a strategic program. Now, I didn't have any background in program management, so I didn't know much, and I learned a lot from others and through trial and error. And I often joke with my team that you can see my learnings from the scars on my back. But I've persevered. I've been working at Blue Cross now for 11 years, continuing to lead our enterprise-wide transformation programs. And part of the success that we've had in our programs is our laser focus on measuring the results of the initiatives and the improvements that are part of those programs. And we call that value management. And I'm going to share with you that information today. So as I started working in these large scale programs, I saw a common problem. To create transformational change, it almost always requires a significant investment of money, time, and human capital. And lots of people, I would like to say everyone, had a hard time articulating what the change would look like at the end. And even more difficulty describing how people would see the change once it was complete. And I saw it over and over. Executives were quick to ask for funding and resources, but couldn't always provide a vivid description of how the company would operate differently and more effective at the end. And then when times are good, these requests seem to get approved almost on the word of the executive. And when times are tight, there's more scrutiny, and these types of significant transformations are more likely to get deferred or denied. And that's an interesting irony, because it's when the market is challenging and when performance maybe isn't as strong that we really need those transformational ideas the most. And what I saw was it's not so much that we didn't have the right ideas, it's just that there was a higher standard to convince everyone that that was the right investment, because we had a difficult time really describing how it would work and convincing them that it would work and that it would be different in the end. And our value management process really works to address that. So at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, we've been on, we call it a value journey. I've been there 11 years, but some of the first programs had started a couple of years before I got there. And we have been on this journey the whole time. We've had a variety of programs over that time, programs that focused on cost reduction, some on our corporate culture, some on customer experience, others on core operational performance. And we didn't have all the answers at the start. We started small, and we built our experience and our expertise around this over time and over these programs. We put the initial pieces in place with our first program that was called Performance Transformation back in 2008. And we saw what worked and we saw what didn't. And then we continued to add pieces that were needed through the additional programs. And we were critical of ourselves about what didn't work as well. And we worked to adjust those and fix those. And here we are now in 2021. And I'll tell you, it feels like it. We have a fairly mature process. But I also will tell you that we continue to evolve. And, you know, in 5 years, I might look at the way we're doing it today and it may feel like it's still rudimentary. But that's how it's been for us. We have just continued to advance the model, refine it, and make it work better all the way through. This page here starts, is part of our real foundation. And when we first started working with our value, we realized that even amongst ourselves, even amongst the program office folks, we didn't speak the same language when we talked about value. And so we worked to create a common vocabulary that enabled us to talk about this and understand each other real consistently. We work to identify, you know, and be clear about like what is administrative savings and what is cost avoidance and all of those things. And it resulted in these value drivers. And these are really the elements within a project or an initiative where we can drive value, where we can derive value. This page here is our financial drivers. These are all drivers that we've been able to ultimately quantify in economic terms. Usually these have some direct impact on the profit and loss statement. And while this is not an exhaustive list and it's surely tailored to whatever industry you're in, for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, we're looking at those margin and cost elements that are really separately identifiable and traceable into the financial statements. Similarly, we have what we call the strategic branch of our value tree. And these value drivers are much more difficult to convert to a dollar-based measure and trace to the P&L, but they do represent value, and they help us answer the question of why we might embark on an initiative. So you see on this list here, there are performance attributes like cycle time, and there's data quality elements, and there's satisfaction, but there's also things that relate to Blue Cross, like our social mission. We have a calling to improve the health of the general population, not just our members, but we are called to help improve health throughout the state of Michigan and even the country. And so we've worked to identify these, and projects that deliver on those outcomes do represent value to us. So you'll see the list there with some of the examples, but we work very hard to articulate the value, especially that's not economically measurable. And usually we try to do this with some manner of a metric or a measurement that we can show a change in the positive direction that would represent that value. So over time, this is the process, our value management process that we use. It's a 6-step process that you see here. I'll go through these real quick first off, and then I'll dive into them a little bit all the way through. So the first step is identify, and that's really all about getting clear about what are we doing and why. And we start to identify what's the opportunity for value that's within this idea. Next, we go in and we spend a lot of time estimating. This is happening kind of as the solution design is getting detailed, and we take that design and we work to understand how does it change the process? How is it going to change the work that happens in the process? How is it going to be different? And we work to measure and identify how those differences will translate into value and those outcomes. The next step is own, and we spend a lot of time, we're pretty rigorous about getting ownership for initiatives. So we make sure that we identify who's responsible for delivery of the initiative, but also who will end up owning the outcomes. There are lots of projects that we do. We're a big enterprise, and there's a lot of projects that are done in one functional area, and for whom the outcome and the benefit is derived in a different area. And we need to have both of those folks on board through this ownership process. Then we go to deliver. This is where the initiative would get implemented, and we have some additional steps that we do through this process to help manage and maintain the value. And then once it's done, we go to an evidencing phase where we work to capture evidence that demonstrates that the value has been delivered. And then lastly, we spend a good chunk of time to recognize the folks and celebrate the contributors that have made a difference in our continuous improvement programs. So we're going to start excuse me, talking about the identify step. And in this phase, really all we're talking about is we're dropping it to paper. We're getting it down in writing, what we mean to do, and what we think is going to happen.
Matt, I apologize, but your audio got very faint momentarily. If you could double check just your microphone to make sure everything's connected, okay?
It is. Is that better?
Yeah, that's a little bit better.
Okay, sorry. Thank you,
Yeah.
Jose. So after we drop it to paper, we'll really look and identify how the process works, what are the pain points that are needing to be addressed, and we work with the business area and the experts in the area to start identifying those value drivers that are going to ultimately help us demonstrate the value. And I always tell my team that nothing happens by accident. It's always cause and effect. And with this step, we're starting to document the cause and understand what effect we're aiming to achieve. This is a kind of summarized example of one of our worksheets that we use in this phase. We complete this with the business team, and we're looking to describe the opportunity in enough detail that it's clear what we're going to do, capture how it's going to drive value and change. Is it going to be if it's in servicing, are we looking at reducing calls, reducing the time that it takes to complete a call, etc. All of those things, that's what we're looking for. And then we make sure that we got to know kind of who are the players that we're working with, what are the areas that are impacted, who owns key sets of data that we're going to need, and this sheet then becomes the starting of our charter, really. As we roll through, and these templates that I'm going to show you all kind of work and build together as we go through the process of implementing an initiative. So now once we've finished the identification step, we move into estimating, which is one of our most important steps. So here we're looking to identify the metrics and the baseline that are relevant, and then estimating the impact of the change, the impact of the initiative. So to do that, we need to know where we started and where we believe we're going to end up. And we ultimately document that in a value formula so that there's alignment around how much value is going to be and how we derived it and the methodology that we used in order to develop that estimate. Here's the worksheet, one of the worksheets that we use in this process. This is our initiative value template. And through identify and estimate phases, we're working with the business all the time, understanding their work, documenting the opportunity, uncovering the value drivers, and now we're going to translate this into a formula. So we start by identifying the metrics that are at stake, whether they're cost metrics or performance metrics, not particularly important. And it's important, but what is important is that we get a baseline measure for that. So a pre-improvement measure. Then we work with our colleagues in the business to understand the change and begin to assess the impact of that change on those metrics and what target state are we aiming for. We usually look at that and then we work to develop a formula that would go down in this value calculation of how much value we think it is and how did we calculate it. For instance, let's say we're working on reducing call time. So if we can reduce a call by 8 seconds, then that means we can have X number of more calls addressed or address them with X number of fewer people. And we have to have all these metrics and measurements in order to translate that operational change into its financial outcomes. And so that, and all of that math gets captured on this template here so that we know how we got to the answer that we did. The next phase is own, which is one of our, as I mentioned, this is one of our most important steps. And it's one in some of the organizations I've been in, this was a step that prevented a lot of value from getting done because ownership wasn't established and aligned the right way. But Blue Cross does it really well. So this is all about getting accountability for those outcomes. Once we have those estimates, we want to make sure we know which business area or areas are going to be running the delivery and which executives are going to be championing the progress through. And so a lot of this process in ownership is around syndicating. My boss, our VP, Cindy Dion, she says, syndicate, syndicate, syndicate. And we get formal alignment with the key stakeholders so that we can get a commitment around, number one, delivering the change that is anticipated, but also delivering the outcome that results from that change. And I'll slide ahead. We have, of course, another template that we use for this. This is essentially a charter document. Now we're deep enough into this process that the charter document is fairly complete. And this is very summarized, of course. But we use this then to capture all of the data around the initiative, the analysis, and the timelines so that we can share it with the business sponsor. And ultimately, this creates what we call a covenant. We could call it a promise, we could call it a commitment, but the way that we manage it, we have chosen to use the term covenant because let's just be honest, I've broken thousands of promises in my day, but I have not broken very many covenants. So we chose that word specifically to set the right expectation. And you'll see over here, this is all part of that syndicating process. So the stakeholders are seeing all the underlying work that developed along the way. And ultimately, on the right-hand side of this, you see sign-off lines. And especially initially, we were intent on getting sign-off on these. Now, especially in this remote world, we don't get wet signatures anymore, but we get email acknowledgements and alignment that are part of our records so that we know, hey, everybody agreed this is how it's going to work, this is what it's going to deliver, and there's a commitment across the whole team to work together to achieve those outcomes. Once that's, let's just say it's time to implement, right? We've done all that work to get it ready and planned, and it would be a shame to fumble the ball now. Nonetheless, it happens. And the work that we do through the deliver phase is all about preventing the erosion of value. We've done all this work up front that has set us up to run the race, but this is running the race. And this is about making sure that we win the race. And if we can't quite win the race, that we run a personal best time in the race. So all of that helps to set us up so that we can be successful. And we do that by keeping regular pulse checks with the team that's implementing and leveraging the insights that we've gained in the planning process to anticipate and mitigate risks. And then as changes happen, and they do, we will continually update and revise the charter and the value estimation as we learn more and get deeper into the implementation. Here's just a snapshot of part of a template that we use to track items as they go through the delivery process. We always keep an eye on the benchmarks of timing and cost and ownership in this process. And we make sure we're keeping track then of, is it on schedule? You'll see over at the left, is it on schedule from a timing standpoint? Is it on budget for what we thought the investment was going to be? And are we still on track to deliver the value that was identified in the beginning? And we align the business to kind of confirm those things on a periodic basis. Sometimes it might be bi-weekly, sometimes it's monthly, it's whatever's necessary. And what we do is we use this as a manner and a means to be transparent about the trade-off decisions that cannot be avoided in the process. Projects encounter difficulties. They're over budget, sometimes over time. And I saw a lot of instances in my past where we made trade-offs, and it seemed like we always took the value outcomes. They always took the hit. We would always try to get back on schedule or on budget by thrifting out some of the functionality that was anticipated, and that ultimately then reduces the value that you get. So we use this and work with the business owners to make sure that we have a lot of transparency around those decisions. And then as changes are made, we will maintain a change log and update all of our artifact documents so that they represent the latest status of each initiative. So once we're done with the implementation phase, it starts to wrap up. And evidence phase of our value management process is that wrap up. We start with one question, which is really, does the effort that was just completed genuinely reflect the improvement that we anticipated? So we'll go through and we go back all the way to those initial estimates and documents to remind ourselves, here's what was going to happen in the process, Here's what we expected to happen from an outcome standpoint, and we go and start to gather evidence to demonstrate that those things have happened or demonstrate what has actually happened. And ultimately, we validate this with some of our finance folks that have a objective viewpoint in the process. We do this through something that we call our value evidence package. And this I will say is probably one of the most unique parts of how we do value management. I just don't think a lot of companies go through this exercise and use this. But it's part of what makes it really effective for us. So we essentially assemble documentation and evidence, comparing all the pre-implementation and post-implementation performance. And we try to tie it all back to source documents that we know are reliable. Accounting ledgers, HR records, published performance reports, etc. And we assemble these things into an evidence package and then combine that with the voice of the business that lived the change. And we assemble this into really a story of the initiative and the change that has been made. And ultimately, we tell that story, and then this evidence package is reviewed by our VP of Finance, our controller, and he signs off on it. So he validates that all those things make sense. If it's an administrative cost reduction, we put right in front of him, here's the costs that were occurring before, here are the costs that are occurring afterwards. It's very easy for him to see, like, yeah, costs came down. And so we work with our business team and our finance team to assemble all of that and get it all validated and verified. And then the final step that we go through is called recognize. And this is another area where the companies I used to work for didn't spend a lot of time on this. So you think about it, the folks that put a lot of time and effort into this, they get done, but there's not always a lot of recognition and thank yous that go to the team. Well, we make a point of really recognizing them. We make sure that we're systematically reporting our achievements across the leadership team. We formally recognize those stakeholders and champions, and then we partner with finance to ensure that the impacts that we're seeing are sustained. We don't want to have that value be transitory and then go away. So we do this again through another form that we use, and this is like a congratulatory note that we send for every initiative that is completed that delivers value. So as Jose said in the beginning, we've done over 1,000 initiatives so far. So there are somewhere in the system more than 1,000 of these forms, and it's very helpful to us because it shows if it's part of a big program, how that initiative contributed to the delivery of an entire program, and it is sent to the executive in the area, and all of the contributing folks are copied on it, and it's been great because the executives are very good then about telling their staff, hey, I see you got this done, and that's great, and it's improved our business or reduced our costs. And the other thing is, we really never miss an opportunity to highlight our initiatives in a feature article in our weekly news publication. We are always looking for opportunities to promote the work that is done, the continuous improvement work that is done, and really the efforts that are being expended by the people who put their heart and souls into the transformations. All right, here's my last slide. And this is sort of an extra slide that I added right at the end. We talk about this all the time. We have, this is what we call our secret sauce, our formula for success that has made our big transformation programs consistently successful. And it starts with leadership at the top. Our most successful programs come from our CEO and have his attention, have his support, and not just tacit support. They have his active support, which means then that he gets executive ownership aligned around those outcomes and those objectives. Those executive owners then are able to dedicate employees to it, and we get employees that are really committed to making change. And through it all, we are able to, we go out of our way to be very transparent with the entire enterprise. The executive team knows what progress we're making. The employees know the progress we're making, and we celebrate it all the way through. And then lastly, disciplined execution, of which our value management process and our practices is a key element of that disciplined execution all the way through, because we have such a focus on our outcomes, and we want to make sure that we're delivering everything that is promised in these transformational programs. So at this point, I appreciate the opportunity. I think it's time for our Q&As. Jose, if you'd like to, if anybody has any, I'm looking in the chat to see if there are any.
Oh, don't worry, we have lots of questions for you, Matt. So I'm gonna ask you to stop sharing your presentation so that they can see us on the big screen now. And what a fantastic presentation, Matt. And I want to put this in context for our audience globally. Matt and his team at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, if I'm not mistaken, because I have led the awards ceremony for the Business Transformation World Summit for several years, and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan has won awards for business transformation, operational excellence, based on results that Matt has just shared with us. I mean, it's these are award-winning best practices that you're getting a glimpse on here. Let me also point out that we know, by working with over 100 cross-industry organizations in transformation, some of the best in the world, that it's easy to say I'm doing a transformation. It's easy to say I'm accelerating innovation and improvement, but nearly half of the organizations that say that, 18 months to 3 years later, nothing happened and it's dead. It starts with a bang and then fizzles out. Now, Matt is talking to us about something that's happening for nearly a decade here. Less than 1% of the organizations that start a transformation process or an innovation acceleration process survive a decade on that path. And not only we have Blue Cross Blue Shield doing this here, but they're still thriving, which is fantastic. So, Matt, you're part of the 1% club, whether you like that or not.
Thank you, Jose. That's nice to know.
Now, let's go to the questions. Several questions and themes that have emerged here. Some of them tactical, a few more strategic. The first one is, let's get very specific on some things here. How long do you track the value creation from these improvements and innovations?
Well, after it's completed, we will track it and confirm that it is sustained until we kind of believe there's no risk that it will unwind. Once we know that it's sort of in its perpetual state, we don't continue to track it. And when we measure our value, this is the other thing, Jose, I don't think I mentioned, we only measure annual impact. So if we do a change that improves costs for 5 straight years, we only take the incremental annual value. So that $1 billion is it's not accumulating over a bunch of years. I got $50 million incremental value in year 1. I got another 50 million of incremental value in year 2, which would really be 100 in that year. So but that's how we track it, and how we track it until we feel like we don't have to anymore.
Very well. Another somewhat tactical question that has come up has to do with the discussion around redirected labor. Do you treat redirected labor as an intangible or intangible benefit?
Well, it depends. And I assume when you talk about redirected labor, we refer to that as redeployment. So I make an improvement, it frees up capacity,
Yep.
but I'm not laying off people because I
Yep.
have some other equal or more urgent need to which I want to assign those people. So we will we count that as value, but we do it in a tricky way. The team is responsible for creating that capacity. If it only counts as a cost reduction if they have separately gone to executive leadership and asked separately for the increased resources that are needed for whatever new function needs to be attended to. So we make them go back and almost kind of re-ask for those people to redeploy them if it's going to be counted as administrative value. If they don't do that, then it's not going to be administrative value. We might be able to count it as some cost avoidance, but we won't let them have counted as administrative cost reduction.
Okay.
Jose?
There are pros and cons of that can be debated, but it's good to know what your line is. There's a huge debate on this. Some organizations think you should call as tangible because that capacity over time will be realigned unless you have a really horrible management system that lets people just kind of to go not do anything, which is not usually the case with most organizations. But yes, this very good insight. Another question here related to kind of the practice itself. We know through practice across multiple organizations that people really have a hard time estimating value creation. I mean, we typically have like a joke that we say, we do the big three questions with them. What's not happening or working? Why do you say that? And then we say, so what? What is the value creation potential of this idea on an annual basis if I put a little team to work on this? Is order of magnitude, $10,000, $100,000, millions of dollars? What is the order of magnitude assessment? And people have a really hard time with the so what question because for several reasons. Often they don't have access to the cost data. Often they haven't really thought through the operational side of things and what are the pros and cons of those actions. And then organizations may be protective about certain types of cost data that we have. How do you deal with the coaching with the employees and managers and leaders in the organization on assessing initial value, estimating the value of their improvements or innovations?
So over time, we've really developed a great relationship and partnership with our business partners. We want them to be able to express what they're doing in the most positive, high benefit terms as possible. Now, there are always initiatives that are hard to measure. Initiatives, in our business, retention of customers is a big thing. And they'll do things that, well, it's going to increase customer retention. Well, it's really hard to isolate things that are happening in an area that has 50 other changes happening simultaneously, known or unknown, to isolate. There's hard to have that science. But we ask them, do what you can to measure that baseline. A lot of it comes from understanding the baseline, Jose. And if they can figure out how to measure that baseline, well, now they know how to measure it in the forward state. So we just work with them. We want them to be able to articulate the outcomes in the most favorable manner. So we really work and we'll translate operational performance changes and trace them all the way through. Like, I'm changing this process. This is going to eliminate all this work. When I eliminate this work, that means less people. So we'll trace all those changes all the way down to its final kind of outcome. And usually it gets more and more economic as you trace it through. But it's hard. It's hard. There are things that we still do where we're like, well, I think it adds value, but I don't know how to show it. I mean, and then you just have to use kind of your intuition, and that's executive leadership, really making a lot of those decisions.
I want to follow up on that in a little bit because there are questions around that, but I'm gonna park that for a moment and go a little bit deeper on the transparency of cost, because it seems that that's very important, that you have transparency on the cost structure of the company when you're asking every employee to assess, improvement baselines. Um, Curious about, first of all, if that assumption is true, because, for example, I want to do an improvement in a certain part of the company, but I don't know what the average salary is for the people who work on that side of the company, on that part of the company, and I need to assess labor costs. So how do you deal with situations like that? There's, where you have to share perhaps sensitive information with employees. How is that handled?
Yeah, so Blue Cross has a really slick way of handling that. They have, and it's a tool that was invented for budgeting and planning purposes, and they call it the FTE calculator. And what they do is they periodically go through and they take average salaries across every grade level, average fringe loads, etc., and they load them into this tool. So when you say, I'm going to reduce 3 positions, it's a grade 4, a grade 6, and a grade 8. We have across the company averages of salary and fringe loaded salaries for those people. And what we say is, it's not important that you get the specific one of the person that ends up being eliminated, because it could have been anybody. It's meant to be accurate, not necessarily precise. And in the most part, it's been fine. But that they have a really unique tool that has allowed people, and that FTE calculator, it gets used for a lot of stuff that's not within our area too. It's a whole budgeting tool. We actually probably piggy-tailed off. It's really a budget tool, and we piggy-tailed it as a way to manifest the value in our initiatives. Great
That is a
question.
that sounds like a fantastic tool, by the way, and a level of transparency that cannot be taken for granted, because a lot of organizations struggle with this issue, Matt. So I'm really glad that you share that with us. A lot of organizations often have a hard time sharing that data for two reasons. One is that sometimes they just become very controlling about it, and they don't want people to really know what it is. They consider it to be almost proprietary. The other reason is that sometimes they just don't know, and they don't want to admit that they don't know, because the accounting system has become so complex that they cannot really tell you what the costs of certain areas are. So that structure sounds really beneficial. I want to maximize our time here, so I want to ask follow up on that intangible benefit question. Listen, I think that we are going to do a change here. There is going to increase customer satisfaction. This thing is strategic, Matt. It's going to make us the market leader. And then Matt asks me, can you put a dollar value to that? I'm like, that's really hard. I can't do that. So how do you deal with a little bit more color and detail on how do you deal with the number of intangible benefit things that pop up? How do you prioritize the list?
Well, we would start, Jose, by asking them, well, how would I know we're going to become the market leader? What will that look like? And they'll answer, well, it might, and all of a sudden it'll give them a different perspective. Well, we're going to be ahead of Health Alliance plan or whatever, some competitor plan, or we're going to be, you're going to see it in JD Power surveys. We should make a big improvement in JD Power surveys. So once you start to ask that series of questions about, well, what does that mean and how would I know? How could I prove it? They actually know the answer. It just doesn't occur to them that that's an acceptable response because it's not monetized. Monetization is overrated on a lot of business processes. Don't need it monetized. I just need to be able to show that it matters and that I got better, and let someone else figure out the intrinsic value to them of a 3-point increase in customer satisfaction. I can't quantify that. When I was at the auto company, we had all of these, we had this model around attributing incremental sales versus replacement sales, and it was all based on a bunch of historical data, which ended up being faulty because the market is dynamic. It's not built, today is not what it was before. And so you almost have to rely on the expertise and the intuition of those people, but you can help them. I always say, we're looking for that vivid description. That doesn't mean it has to be a $ as the first character. I need a vivid description of what is going to be different and how it's going to look.
That's terrific. Matt, our time is up, but next time I'm going to invite you back. I'm going to have a 45-minute live Q&A with you. And for two reasons. One is that this is such an important topic, because as much as organizations say, oh, you don't have to show me the value of something, next recession that hits, your improvement program will disappear if you do not have a track record of value creation. So it sounds like common sense, but common sense is the least common of the sense in large organizations. And what you're doing is pioneering. So number one, that. The second reason is that what you're doing is world-class. It is a great program. That this value creation component is just one of the many great aspects of a great enduring program that accelerates excellence and innovation for value creation. So congratulations to you and the team for doing that. Lots of questions from the audience. I'm connecting with you on LinkedIn. I'm sure you're going to get lots of other people who are going to be connecting with you on LinkedIn, following up and asking you questions about and following your journey. So congratulations again, and thank you for taking the time to share this expertise with us.
Thank you, Jose. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Matt Thibaudeau from Blue Cross Blue Shield on the path for value creation. Such an important topic. There is, every transformation, every acceleration of excellence and innovation must be translated into value creation. And whether it's a social or financial value creation, you must be able to articulate what your transformation is doing in terms of value creation. And what Matt has shared with us are important details of that journey. And of course, we have just skimmed the surface on some of these important questions. And thank you for the many questions you posed. I tried to address as many of those as I could. And we'll bring Matt back in the future to go deeper into this topic. Now, let's take a break and let's finish with a tremendous leader of excellence and innovation joining us. We're going to have the leader for operational excellence at global manufacturing strategy and deployment at Johnson & Johnson with us. So Marcus Paganini is going to be joining us to discuss the journey and the transformation at Johnson & Johnson and what is the path towards smart operations where they're combining operational excellence and Industry 4.0. Amidst all the disruption in the world, Johnson & Johnson is playing a pivotal role in our fight against the pandemic. And it's going to be great to see the insights from someone who has been in the front lines and leading with the organization. So taking a break now. See you back at the top of the hour.